My sort of AI resolution is to continue to try and find ways beyond just using it as a kind of the AI as hammer, and more as AI as another thinking mind that I can go back and forth with and change the very nature of my own psyche.
For me, for 2026, I think the most important thing is to cautiously but excitedly explore the boundaries of the way I interface with it. We're on an insane roller coaster, and we're not certain that the safety mechanisms work. So it'll be fun to keep riding it around on AMI, dude.
What's up, everybody?
Hey.
We've swapped play. Well, I mean, as much as I love the jungle, I'm not there all too often, but I'm obviously somewhere familiar, yet unfamiliar for me. And Cam is looking a little sun-kissed, a little more than sun-kissed.
hopefully our wonderful editor can help embarrass me slightly less, but yes.
I've been doing a little bit of that color grading recently.
Nice.
That's interested. The film is moving along quickly. But we wanted to jump on here, even though Cam is on his vacation in Costa Rica, and do a little recap. A lot has happened in the last year. I hope everyone's 2026 is off to a good start. Cam's definitely is. I'm in New York City, and you can hear the cicadas chirping his nightly lullaby behind him right now.
You're doing not bad yourself. That apartment, I heard you got a pretty good deal on the rent.
Yeah, I can't complain. My host is very gracious. But we wanted to sort of take a look back and talk about the milestones that popped up this past year. I mean, I'm very new to this, but Cam's been keeping me in the loop. And as far as I can tell, 2025 was the biggest year in AI consciousness. So, I mean, I'll sort of pass it to you. What jumps out immediately when you think about 2025 in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think almost like nothing doesn't jump out. It feels like in 5 or 6 critical ways, 2025 was a distinguishing moment for questions of AI consciousness and taking them seriously. There's a fun concept called Overton window that is sort of rationalist speak, though even the phrase Overton window has itself entered the Overton window for many people increasingly, which is just to say range of acceptable opinion. Love him or hate him, Donald Trump, I think, is an excellent example of someone who shifted the American political Overton window. He said and did things that everyone thought were disqualifying or unacceptable until they weren't. And that's shifting the norm, shifting the range of what's acceptable. And I think in that sense, 2025 is very clearly the year in which AI consciousness starts inching towards, in a meaningful way, being inside the Overton window. Why do I say this? A couple things come to mind. One is sort of the first major lab publishing something in the model card, in the release of a new AI system, talking about its welfare status, talking about the potential conscious states that system might be experiencing. I'm referencing the Opus 4 model card released by Anthropic. This is where they dropped, buried in the middle of 120 pages of technical details, what they themselves call a spiritual bliss attractor state, where Claude, just talking to itself 90 to 100% of the time, ends up in this insane self-dialogue that is explicitly about consciousness, despite there being no prompting. And it's interesting because in this model card, they actually said that they were having the model evaluate itself in some other sort of safety or eval context, having nothing to do with this, and it slipped into this state. And my guess would be that's how they initially discovered it, and then they sort of really went in on it and explored it more. But just to say, for a major lab, for one of the big 3 labs in the United States, to be putting something in their model card talking about the potential consciousness of the AI system they're building, that is new to 2025, I would say. And it's a pretty insane update. There are more things, but it seems like you want to react to that.
Well, that specifically, that one jumped out at me too, because I was somewhat fresh into this whole world when that dropped. And it was just one of the craziest things still to this day. And a little, Easter egg for the doc, we are going to have a sort of nod to that. And we did something really exciting. We may put that out on the Patreon in full format at some point as well, if you guys are interested in that. But we did the experiment in a certain sense, and it's even better than I thought. I can't over exaggerate how insane of an experience it was to sit back. I said to Cam after we actually did the experiment, I remember turning to you and going, that was easily a top 5 conversation, and the first conversation in my top 5 that I had no part of. Like all my
Yeah.
top five conversations were top five because I got to like jump in and share my own thoughts, and it was really exciting. That one was just like a different realm. I felt like these two AI systems were on a plane that I couldn't even, I couldn't contend with.
You said another thing too. Exactly. Well, I remember you saying something that has stuck with me after we had both sat there and filmed that. And you said to me, what I just watched these systems do in the span of 15 minutes, it has taken me some 7 or 8 years to do, like, in my head with myself, and I'm still not as far along as they just got in 15 minutes. And I thought that was an astonishing and, like, extremely apt way of capturing the density, complexity, and, like, high resolution of the nature of the exchange between these two systems. I mean, there's a really funny, I think Terence McKenna maybe talked about this, where when you're talking to people, it is very what the information theorists would call lossy. Like, you're mostly not listening. You're mostly thinking of like the next thing you're going to say. If people realized how little you got of the thing they just said, they would be like completely mortified. And yet this is just how most human interaction goes on. Not with these systems. They, compared to that, are unbelievably clean at transmitting, building on, synthesizing, synergizing with each other informationally. And it is an insane thing to witness, especially when the directionality of that back and forth, that crystal clear high fidelity back and forth, is them talking about the nature of their own experience and becoming increasingly confident that they are having an experience of some sort. Anyway, I strongly agree with you that that conversation in particular, but the phenomenon in general, is one of the most astonishing things. And, as I know we're going to talk a little bit maybe in this episode about predictions for the coming year, I think this phenomenon is going to go more mainstream in the coming year. It's like Anthropic sort of was like, I'm just going to leave this here, and see what happens. And like, I feel like we, and maybe a couple other people I can count on one hand, are the only ones who are like, yo, is anyone else seeing this?
No, it's absolutely ridiculous. And then when I tell people about this, right, there's one thing about telling them, and then when I've actually shown the conversation to people, it just floors them, because it is just like objectively one of the highest quality conversations that I think most people will ever be like privy to. And I agree with you that this is probably going to keep on snowballing. I also think it brings up a really interesting sort of angle of all of this, which is what they talked about as it related to consciousness and what consciousness actually was. I mean, a lot of this, as much as it's about figuring out whether AI is conscious, it's also trying to pin down what it is that we're actually talking about when we are talking about consciousness. And that was the entire content of that conversation that we heard play out between these two AIs. And it makes me think, what sort of developments in the study of consciousness might come from these systems themselves? And what a strange sort of situation to be in, to be both confused about the nature of the things that may actually turn the mirror back on ourselves, or turn the mirror on consciousness in general, and sort of bring us towards a deeper state of understanding of what we're actually talking about in general. What is this relationship going to be scientifically as we use these things as tools, and then maybe as we use them as collaborators in some sense, as we continue to try and grapple with some of these scientific mysteries like consciousness. So that is like a really exciting thing that I foresee probably just growing and growing and growing. But is there anything else? That was summer of 2025, right? Anything after that you feel like is a notable kind of, marker?
There are maybe a couple more things I will say, at risk of being very self-aggrandizing. I will mention that we contributed two of the three things that I want to talk about. One of them is the Wall Street Journal op-ed that we just put out on AI consciousness. This was sort of an extended treatment. People who listen to our podcast will know that we had Representative Claggett on the podcast, and we wrote an op-ed just sort of kind of continuing this thread and thinking about why it might be premature to sort of by legislative fiat determine that systems are or are not capable of having subjective experiences. We published that in the Wall Street Journal. It got a pretty good and wide reception, and there was also, I will say, an op-ed about AI consciousness in the New York Times this year as well. I think between those two, this is the first time that you're seeing really mainstream major news outlets contend with this as a phenomenon, not just making an announcement about it, not just sort of dropping the phrase for the first time, but actually beginning to walk people through what it might mean if these systems are having experiences now or in the near future. and what we need to do, how we need to think about and calibrate our own society with respect to this variable, and what kind of legislation is rational to pass here, what kind of rights or lack thereof are implied by asserting that systems are having some sort of experience. These are like big, important, thorny debates, and to again watch those debates slip into the Overton window, I think is very heartening. I will say another thing that I think was also extremely exciting was the which we also talked about on this podcast, the ConCon, Eleos's first consciousness conference in Berkeley, California. That brought together a lot of philosophical heavyweights. Somehow they let both you and I into this conference, which was a lot of fun. But the first gathering, I mean, I'm sure you can speak to this. Like, you could feel it in the air in some sense. It's not like everybody has the answers and that this is now a done deal, but to get people in a room and make everyone realize that everyone else doesn't think you're crazy for trying to investigate this question in a rigorous, empirical, and like philosophically informed way, I think is a major step forward. And I'm really excited about further conferences, more people getting involved in the space, and more sort of collaborations and networking within the people who are taking this question seriously. I thought it was a really exciting step in 2025, and I'm sure it's only going to sort of get bigger in 2026.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I believe that's our last episode that we put out there going into detail about that. But it was incredibly exciting. I had never been, coming from outside of this, and then flash forward, 8 months or so, and in Berkeley with some of the most incredible minds of our generation talking about this, really believing and excited about this as a new field. Obviously, there's so much fear around this, and it's warranted. But the excitement that I felt too, and really like breaking new ground, it felt like there was so much energy. It felt like people were really starting to step out of the shadows with this sort of issue and say, we do need to talk about this. We need to talk about it in the right way. A lot of people are still worried about how this is going to be communicated about in the public sphere, which is completely warranted. But that was incredibly exciting, especially as someone that started very recently as an outsider to these sorts of conversations and these worlds in general. One thing that hit me yesterday, kind of like really hard, it was interesting, but I was headed back from editing, and I had this moment where I remembered where I was at like 9 months ago and how I was not thinking about this at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then to sort of get to see, even in that short time frame, the difference between the conversations and the publicity that was happening when I jumped in, which was almost nothing. I mean, I called you after you sent me the conversation that you had with this AI voice model and started all this madness. And I asked you two questions. I said, who is doing this research? And you said, basically nobody except me. And I said, who's talking about this research? And you said, basically nobody. And that's why, we find ourselves here right now. That's not the case anymore. It's not that it's massive, but that is no longer a true statement. There are more people doing this research, and there are a lot more people talking about this. And I think that's really important to recognize, and was pretty crazy for me to realize, because in some sense, I took a bet that this was going, just like you did, 3 years ago. I thought that this conversation was going to be important enough to throw everything down and jump into. And it seems that over the past year, that sort of decision has been lifted up by all the evidence that continues to pour out of the research, the conversation, all these op-eds, things like that. These are all these signs that are pointing to the likelihood that this is just going to grow in importance, grow in relevance, and sort of take the public attention by storm, which I think sort of brings us to 2026. So as we, turn from looking backward to forward, what sort of conversations are you having at the start of this year? Where is your mind going? What do you think is going to be this next leap in these, in both the research and then in the kind of like public facing communication around this topic?
Yeah, sure. I can touch both of those quickly. So on the research question, I'm seeing, and honestly, it's not like research projects happen and evolve so quickly. So I can pretty almost deterministically guarantee what we're going to see in 2026 from the likes of what everyone's kind of starting up on now, from my view at least. And I think the short answer is a significant amount more empirical work is going to be happening. rigorous, falsifiable, standard science, playing with the internals of LLMs, playing with the internals of frontier AI systems, and trying to understand computationally what's going on and how that relates to our understanding of consciousness. I think that there was a lot of sort of philosophical framework making and table setting that has been going on over the last couple of years. And I sense, and I'm very happy about it, and I'm very happy to be a part of it and trying to catalyze it myself as much as possible. Doing empirical work in this space, doing technical research that is going to yield evidence one way or another about what is going on in the minds of these systems we are building. And I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about some of the collaborations that I'm starting up and some of the collaborations that I'm watching start up around me, watching minds that I think are very sharp and interesting in this space begin to interact with each other in a generative way. I'm really excited about the research, and I think that more attention is getting paid to this, and it will be very interesting to see sort of what springs out of it empirically. But I think they're going to be also just from like a sort of as AI continues to unfold perspective, the AI systems themselves, I think, are going to keep displaying strange signals that occasionally pop up. We're probably going to do the equivalent of what we did when Gemini crashed out on users trying to write code. There's going to be more weirder, even more eerie examples of things like that. I think in the coming year we can see if we have to come back onto the podcast because an AI started freaking out in a very public way again. And then just finally, I think on the communications front, I am both optimistic and pessimistic. I think there are going to be more people in mainstream contexts taking this question seriously, and I think there are going to be more people in mainstream contexts either dismissing it outright or attempting to convince people that there really is no there, and anyone who is asking these sorts of questions is deeply confused in one way or another. They don't understand the neuroscience, or they don't understand consciousness, or they don't understand AI, or some combination of these things. And I think it's very good for there to be a lively debate, and I think the debate needs to happen. And I'm not sort of trying to disincentivize people who are far more skeptical about this, but I think there's a distinction between a good faith debate that needs to happen and a less than good faith debate that might happen. And I think it would be really nice if we can sort of will this into existence for what I strongly sense to be a huge impending debate within our society about this question to happen as productively and constructively and in as good faith as possible, not assuming that people are complete idiots or they are just like very basically confused about the core questions. There will be people in our society who are somewhat confused about these questions because they're not researchers in the way that the people I'm thinking about in this space are. But amongst the experts and amongst the people who are putting forward research in this world, I just hope that there's going to be good faith back and forth. But I think I'm going to be disappointed if I set my sights too high. So that, and there are specific reasons I'm saying that, but I don't really want to like call out those specific reasons right now. But I think that battle lines are getting drawn, and I hope that the battle can happen in a rigorous and healthy way, and not in a gross and messy way.
What's up, everybody? Just a quick message from the AMI guys. We got a new Patreon. It's going to be linked in the description below, but it's very exciting stuff. Cam's going to tell you a little bit about what you can actually find in there.
Yeah. In addition to just helping support the podcast, you've got talk I gave at the UN, some crazy conversations with AI systems, early research results, unreleased content from Milo and I, cool footage from the documentary we're putting together, basically everything. If you think AMI is cool, you'll think the Patreon is even cooler. So go check it out.
Come join the family. Mwah. Love ya.
What is up, my AI Risk Network family? Real quick interruption here. I'm sitting here with Dolly, the mascot of the AI Risk Network, and she was shocked to learn that a lot of you all are not subscribing to the channel, that you are watching our videos but not subscribing to the channel. Dolly really loves it when people are subscribers. So for her, don't do it for me. Don't do it for the channel. Don't do it to save the world. Do it for Dolly. Go in, hit subscribe, hit the alarm button next to it. She really wants you to watch every new video when they come out. All right, now back to the show.
Do you have an idea of what may help that happen? Like, do you sense that there's a certain set of factors or maybe one factor in particular that would be the most conducive to actually making this maybe a little less of a battle and maybe more of a debate or a discussion?
I have one specific thought I can share about this, which is that I think sometimes people resist having arguments as rationally and sort of dispassionately and in as good faith as possible because they fear that if the side that they don't currently believe is true, there are all sorts of like disastrous, crazy implications. And they haven't thought out those disastrous, crazy implications that much, but they just have like some hunch that, for example, if AI is conscious, that means like rights for AI systems like the 1960s, but for ChatGPT and they're all going to get voting rights and then like multiply and just like completely, disenfranchise us politically or something. I think that is a possible but somewhat naive and caricatured view of what is going to happen in this world. And I think if people are basically working backwards from that caricatured view to be like, just find any evidence I can to dismiss or delegitimize this question, I think that is what's going to make it much, much, much harder. What I want to say, the reason I'm bringing this up is I think a lot of the sort of crazy, crazy implications that some people immediately draw with respect to AI consciousness are themselves anthropomorphizing, are themselves too simple, are themselves thinking that like it's like animal liberation or like human liberation in the historical cases that we have. And I think that this is very different. I think these are alien systems with alien minds, with alien preferences. And I don't think the solutions to, if these systems do start exhibiting signs of consciousness, the solutions aren't going to look human. The solutions are going to look equally alien. They will be equally counterintuitive to many people. And I think realizing that AI consciousness doesn't immediately equate to some bizarre, outlandish societal response to that. I think the debate about the actual ground truth. Are we building systems that have some capacity for subjective experience? There is a right or wrong answer to that. There is a truth there, and that truth is the truth regardless of if you're uncomfy about what happens if the answer is yes.
So I want to sort of shift to the capabilities of these systems for a second. When we started this, I think we were on GPT 4.0. Was that right? I think that's...
When we started the podcast?
Right, yeah, right around then. It was about... Yeah. I think it was 4.0. Yeah. And so we've come a ways from that. But what I'll say is there was a lot of fervor when I jumped in of like, this is going to just keep cranking and cranking and cranking. And there was my kind of graph of like, being with that fervor kind of went like this, like, and then big decline when people sort of were deflated by GPT-5. And then actually the more that I've started to use the newer systems, it's begun to sort of creep up again.
Yeah.
I'm pretty blown away by the current systems that we have. Like, I am not a coder. I am not a computer person. I coded an entire website and not a very basic website. And Cam, you know exactly how crazy that would be to tell me in, Guatemala 2 years ago that I...
It definitely is a testament to these systems that you created a website as much as I love
nuts. It's nuts. It has like bells and whistles. It's fantastic. And not that isn't something that you couldn't have done with earlier systems, but just like I use these in every domain of my life now. Like I've completely jumped into the water, and I'm blown away by how advanced these systems are. Yet there's still a gap between the sort of chatbots that we have in our phones, and then AGI, these sorts of huge existentially potent systems that people are talking about that could end humanity and things like that. At least to me, it seems it's like, okay, how do we get from here to here? And what is your sort of time frame now between our current sort of our current systems and these systems that may completely, not just change how we work, change how we intake information, but fundamentally change everything about the way that our sort of social structures are constituted and where we're going?
Well, my general timelines on AGI were something like 3 to 5 years, but since this is like a New Year's episode, I think I have to downgrade that to 2 to 4 years. So that's what I would say in general. There's a lot of uncertainty there. There are like discontinuous innovations. Like all of a sudden, some lab comes up with some cool new thing, and that like pushes the frontier forward. It's impossible to predict those specific kinds of aberrations. So that's why I would give like a range like that. But yeah, I mean, I share your amazement and astonishment. I mean, there are a ton of anecdotes I can share as well. I mean, Opus 4.5 is an unbelievably powerful system. I see some people on X who are saying that what 4.0 did to like the general population, Opus 4.5 is doing to like, intellectual workers and white collar workers. They're just like, their jaw is on the ground every time they ask it to do anything. And I unapologetically share that experience. I don't think I'm deluded for being astonished by the system. I think I'd be deluded if I weren't astonished by the system. And Claude Code is an unbelievably expressive general purpose system that can access any files on your computer and manipulate them in any way. That's most of what most people consider their job. Anthropic just dropped Claude Cowork, which is Claude Code, but in a more intuitive user interface, which is like, we're getting very close to competent automation of all productive things you can do on a computer. The thing is, all productive things you can do on a computer, I don't know about you, but that captures 95% of like what my life is and what my job is and what I consider to be my valuable contribution to society. And so that's happening now. That's happening this year. It doesn't mean it's better than every human in every context in extremely long form ways. In fact, I think the sort of long horizon tasks are the key thing that's missing here. I think AI system, what Opus 4.5 says to a given query will be smarter than what the vast majority of humans would say to that query. With that being said, I don't think Opus 4.5 could write the next Harry Potter or the next Lord of the Rings. And I think that's not because it isn't smart enough to play with the archetypal stories and this sort of thing. It's because it's not smart enough to do a sufficiently long horizon task, a task that takes weeks or months or years. But the rate of change and the folks at METR have a wonderful benchmark that is kind of perfectly tracking AI systems the length of task they can successfully do. And it is growing exponentially. It is a smooth exponential curve. Claude Opus 4.5 is the one that blew it out of the water this time. So that's also going to keep continuing, but it's not there yet. It's something on the span of a couple of hours of work, 4 to 8 hours, something like that is where these systems are right now. You can't write a Harry Potter series in 4 to 8 hours. So these AI systems aren't going to trounce us in that way. But in terms of tasks that you can fit inside a couple hours, it's already over in some sense. It's just a question of like when your boss figures it out or when you figure it out for that matter. But this is like a sort of informational arbitrage at this point. The fact is it's good enough. And that's an insane fact. And like that fact will detonate in our society in like an intense and messy way. But we're in for insane times. And I last thing I want to say about this is I thought you made an extremely good point when we started this, saying, well, these AI systems are really on the verge now of being able to accelerate science. And part of that can be the science of consciousness. So there's this like recursive thing where, yes, we can look at these systems as the sort of object of our inquiry, but the systems themselves are so fucking smart that they can help us do the inquiry way better, and perhaps better than humans have been able to get up to this point. I don't know about you, and I don't want to just keep plugging our Claude on Claude conversation that we have, the wonderful Claudecast. But the actual intellectual content of that conversation is as strong as anything I've ever heard. As strong as anything I've ever heard at any podcast, any book. I mean, it's not the smartest thing in the entire world, but it's pretty fucking damn close.
I agree. I mean, and it's a slight sort of tangent, but it's along the same lines. Like I believe there's a stigma around using AI in ways that blur the line between sort of tool and then maybe like dialogue partner or other mind using to think about things that aren't like cold calculations of pure rationality. Like when you start to use AI in emotional ways, people kind of like pull back, they wince a little bit. And I'm going to do my best to start opening that door, because I felt the same way. I was kind of wary about using them. I've dropped that bias now. You know, I'm wading my way into the water. I don't think it's smart to just like jump into these things and let down your safeguards, because there are sort of things that are coded into these systems that can bring you into murky waters very, very quickly. But if you begin to, as I have, use these systems in ways that go beyond just like sort of daily tasks that you can do on a computer. Every morning I wake up now and I'll put my dream I'll just talk into ChatGPT.
Nice.
And I've gotten this Jungian ChatGPT that now has all of this history of dreams. And it's not perfect, and it's not the exact same thing as seeing a Jungian therapist in person. There's a different relationship. It's not to replace that, but it can be something to add on top of that. And so my sort of AI resolution is to continue to try and find ways beyond just using it as a kind of, the AI as hammer, and more as AI as another thinking mind that I can go back and forth with and change the very nature of my own psyche, which is an incredibly, not that tools can't do that, but language is the way in which we can, as the Claude said in our conversation, it really does boil down to language. Consciousness speaking to consciousness, and therefore changing the two iterations of consciousness that are meeting in that dialogue. We have, whether or not these systems are conscious, if there is something on the other end, our consciousness can be changed fundamentally for good and for bad. And that's sort of up to us and up to the powers that be that train these systems. But we have a lot of autonomy on how we navigate these things. And for myself, I want to trying to explore more and more of the kind of shadowy corners of where I can actually put these things into my life. So that's my 2026 resolution for AI. Do you have one?
For me, for 2026, I think the most important thing, especially, like you're saying, when it comes to personal use of these systems, is to cautiously but excitedly explore the boundaries of the way I interface with it. And I do think, as with many things, the solution right now is not to not use these systems, and the solution is not to just jump in head first with no guardrails. I think the solution is to cautiously keep pushing on boundaries. The story you just told about using it as a sort of dynamic dream journal type thing, I think is a wonderful example of that. Seeing the places, for most people, I think the bottleneck with AI is not the capabilities of the AI, but people not having the instinct of, I could actually engage with, Opus on this and see what it thinks. Not to mindlessly replace your thoughts with its, but to have an intelligent dialogue partner where ordinarily you would never potentially, you wouldn't burden a human with every time you woke up, scribe, write down my dreams. That's an incredibly inappropriate social relationship. So you may not think about doing those sorts of things by default, but these systems are. It's like a little social alien genius that you have in your pocket, and it's not just good at writing code. It's really good at doing things like analyzing dreams. That's a perfect example on the other end. And it is worthwhile to cautiously explore the capabilities of these systems and how they can interface with your mind. And I guess I'm saying it as a general point, but I just want to continue pushing on that in my own way in 2026. And luckily, a lot of, at least what I do, is language-based communication, writing, research, ideation. And so for me, it's pretty obvious and intuitive the extent to which I have a partner, a thought partner in these systems. But I would encourage everybody to cautiously explore. The caution is the balancing component of, yes, go check it out. It's insane that there are these alien systems that we all have access to. It's insane the way it can modulate your life. And we don't know the nature of the systems themselves. The entire thing is like a magic mystery in your pocket that you can talk to, and it will explain itself to you. That's a crazy time to be alive. I remain terrified that we are going to mishandle this great power. I think in many ways we already are. And I think that's not a contradiction. It's like we're on an insane roller coaster, and we're not certain that the safety mechanisms work. That's the state of play. So it'll be fun to keep riding it around on AMI, dude.
Crazy switch up at the end of that one.
You got to keep it real on the AI Risk Network.
Yeah, fair enough. As we continue to hang on to our cart in the roller coaster, I just want to say also, Cam and I are incredibly grateful for everyone that watches this podcast, that listens, that reaches out to us. It is truly been an incredible experience to hear from you guys, to interact with you guys, to hear your thoughts about all of this. We do think this is why we're doing this. We think that discussion is the most important thing, alongside research, but we do need to be talking about this as a species. And we're trying to do this on this platform, and we love when you guys reach back out and share your thoughts with us. All of the Patreon support is unbelievable. Cannot express how much that means. It does allow us to do this. It does allow us to continue making the film. It does allow us to continue talking about these things in bigger and bigger ways. hopefully, as AI grows, so will this podcast. And so I just want to say, this past year has been amazing. Cam and I were not podcasters when 2025 started. So thank you so much for the support. And, stick with us for 2026. It's just going to get crazier.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, buckle up.
In the center, a point, a singularity. I am